Power unit installation. Power unit assembly is easier to perform on the ground and allows you to check the assembly prior to lifting the unit into position. The spring assembly includes the drums, springs, and center supports with bearings. More than one center support or shaft might be required, depending on the weight and size of the door and the spring life cycle required. Slide springs with center bearing plates attached onto the tube. We'll discuss alternate instructions for solid shafts later. Note that the winding cones are color-coded, either black or red. The black cones must be oriented to the right, the red cones to the left. The terms right hand and left hand are referenced from the inside of the building facing out. This pertains to the springs, the drums, etc. 3 torsion drum types are used in commercial applications. The various drum types are necessary to compensate for the variations in physical dynamics occurring due to more or less weight being transferred to the horizontal tracks during door operation. Standard lift flat drums for standard or low headroom applications. High lift drums having a combination of flat and high winding spirals. Vertical lift conical drums having a continuous taper for the cables to wind on. Position the right-hand drum onto the tube. The right-hand drum is marked with black paint. When the drum is slid onto the tube, drum set screws should be facing the center of the shaft. Repeat for left-hand drum marked with red paint. Carefully raise the spring and shaft assembly into position. For very heavy assemblies, an assistant or a power lift may be necessary. Be sure to have the black painted winding cones and drums on the right side and the red painted cones and drums on the left side. Push the torsion tube through the end bearing on one side and then slide the assembly through the bearing plate on the other. Use a level to verify that the torsion tube is level and straight. Provided the track installation procedures were followed properly, this step should only verify that the installation was done correctly. If not, retrace the procedures and correct the problem. If the center support pad is wood, pre-drill pilot holes in the center support pad prior to mounting the spring center support bracket to prevent splitting of the pad. Using red-headed lag screws, attach the center support to the center pad. Under no circumstances may the torsion center support be fastened directly to a masonry surface without proper anchors to prevent fastener failure. Adjust the spacing of the center supports to ensure that the shaft is straight and at an equal distance from the wall in the center as it is at the end bearing plate. Starting on either side, route one of the cables over the back side of the drum. Insert the stop from the top of the drum through the slot and wind the cable on the drum by turning the top of the drum toward the installer. Most importantly, do not cut the cables. Even if you think there's too much cable, wind the extra cable onto the high spirals of the drum. High lift or vertical lift drums have a tapered section that allows the proper amount of cable to wind onto the drum. This will provide the correct positioning of the door for exact door balance under high lift or vertical lift conditions. When the cable is taut, the set screws should be tightened. Proper torque is approximately 2/3 of a turn after the set screw contacts the tube. Vice grip pliers should be used to prevent shaft rotation and slackening of the cable. Repeat the cable wrap procedure on the other drum and tighten the set screws. Note that spring tension is dangerous. A sudden release of the spring could result in severe injury. Proceed with extreme caution, following these instructions carefully. Before winding and tensioning springs, make sure the door is securely locked down. As an added precaution, place a pair of vice grip pliers firmly on each vertical track immediately above the roller. Always use proper size winding bars. Never use a screwdriver or any other tool too large or too small. They may break and cause serious injury. Stand to the side of the winding bars while winding springs, never directly in line with the rotation of the winding bars. A tip here is to put a chalk mark on each spring before starting to wind the spring. If you should lose track of the number of quarter turns during the winding process, you can count the number of spirals of the chalk mark to determine how many turns you have put on the spring. There will be one spiral for each full turn. Springs should be wound toward the ceiling in quarter turn increments. Refer to the spring tags or hardware box for the correct number of turns to charge the springs. When the spring has been wound to the proper amount, tighten the set screws, being careful to set the points firmly into the shaft. This is usually done by turning the set screw approximately 2/3 turn after contacting the shaft. After the first spring has been charged, remove the vice grip pliers from the shaft.